All right. I think we're on. We're going to give it a few minutes, just a couple minutes while people get on. Uh, I'm still learning how to use this stuff, guys. So I apologize if we're a little bit late. I don't think we're really that bad, but um, I meant to be on earlier and I had hiccups, technological hiccups I've never used to. And I'm a tech guy, so I normally can handle them, but it seems like lately it's been a little bit difficult. Let's see. I can't see myself and you guys, so let me figure out what's going on here. And then we are ready to get going. Uh, Welcome, everybody, once again for tuning in to We the Patriots USA and our free Constitution courses to go through the things when you are done with these four courses that we've been talking about over the last, this will be the third week, right? You will know more about the Constitution than 95% of America. Okay. Because really it comes down to understanding the uh the basics, the spirit behind all of the phraseology that they come up with. And when you understand that, you are just miles beyond everybody else. And that's what I hope to deliver to you. Um, and so tonight is very special. It's probably my favorite aspect of the whole thing. I love it all, but the my favorite aspect is talking about natural versus civil rights. Um, we talked about that last week, but we're going to get into it a lot more tonight. Uh, so just quick a quick bit about We the Patriots USA. Remember that we are a 501c3 or 4, I can't remember which it is. We try to stay outside of the political narrative. We have to for our tax exempt status, but the whole idea is that we want to be Americans together, and there shouldn't be a lot of politics involved. And sadly, things are getting much more political. And if we're all pulling the same way and we're all actually being constitutional, then what George Washington espoused, the only president to not belong to a political party, by the way, uh, we would be a lot closer to where we need to be. And that's the whole purpose of teaching the Constitution, is so that we can all be Americans together. We might have different thoughts about a lot of different areas, uh, physical and governmental policies versus personal stuff and everything like that, and everything in between. But we should be able to talk about those things, and we should be able to uh, get to the point that we have an ability to uh, interact and have laws that are respected, that are proper, so that they will be respected, and get along, and everybody be the better for it. That is the idea. And remember, We the Patriots USA is a public interest law firm. The work they do is pro bono. It is free to the end user. It has a donation component to it, and so we are looking to get as many donations as we possibly can to extend the work. If if we don't have donations, if we're out of money, we can't do the work. We do what we can, but we can only go so far. It costs money just to submit the paperwork and start a case. That usually runs $500 minimum just to get the paperwork in and get the ball rolling, let alone having lawyers and so forth create it all and be doing all this good work. So if you would like to participate, we would love it in any amount. If you can give $25 a month, then you can keep on with these Constitution courses. And we get into all sorts of things. The idea always is teach you how to apply the Constitution in whatever may come up in life. And we're going to talk about some examples tonight, uh, which are hot in the news at the federal level. And then I'm going to show you one at the state level that is just exemplary of things that you'll have to deal with in your states. Uh, if you would do this, I would love to see where everybody's at. If you are willing, if you just type in what state you're in the comments at some point throughout the evening, it really edifies me to see where we're reaching, lets us know where we're not reaching, and helps us get the word out. We've got one more free class, $25 a month, gets you keep these things going. I like to do them and keep them going as much as I possibly can throughout the year. We do have to take some time off summer and in winter time a little bit, just because I get busy, and we might have to take some more time off if we get terribly busy, but usually I have the time to do these classes, and that's my goal for you. And my contribution to the work done by We the Patriots USA. So, with that said, uh, let's get into civil rights versus natural rights. So, last week we talked about our form of government being that of a republic, and wherein, in a republican form of government, all power all power of all kinds resides in free people. Okay. It's absolutely necessary that we make the understanding that all power resides in each of us and then collectively, and that each of us are equally free. We're all born free. We talked about the fact that in Great Britain, or in a monarchy, really nobody is born free. They may become free. The king, if he's born into his kingdom because Papa passes away and a couple days later the baby's born, that would be about the only time somebody is born into absolute freedom in those under a monarchy, or even under a tyranny, just a regular old tyranny of some sort. That's not necessarily a monarchy, but kind of like that. Think Saddam Hussein in Iraq. But his children, he was the tyrant. His children were born subject to him. They weren't born into abject freedom like him. He may have raised them as such, but he had the power and was the only one in that country to have the power. Same thing with a monarchy. You're born to be a monarch, but you're not the monarch yet. You still have to bow to the king or queen until you ascend the throne, and then everybody bows to you. We are Americans. We're born absolutely free. We're born at the position of taking over a kingdom. Our kingdom's really, really, really small. It's ourselves and our stuff and our little domain that we have, but we are born absolutely free. The only thing that restricts us, in if government is run properly, the only thing that restricts us are the equal rights of others. And so that is the purpose of our government, is to make sure that our rights are protected, that everybody has the same privileges and immunities, in other words, rights, that our privilege to be free is not infringed upon, punished, violated, or anything else without the government stepping in and making us right. That's the idea, okay? When government runs correctly. The government doesn't run correctly. So we have all sorts of problems, but we have to remember, order our minds to what it should be. And this is a hard and fast should be, not a pie in the sky, uh, oh, I think everybody should have the same amount of money or whatever. And that's not realistic because not everybody is owed the same amount of money. They haven't worked the same. They haven't inherited the same. They haven't been born in the same circumstances. They're owed their equal rights, but they're not owed property from others and things like that. So we have an absolute written in stone in the law that is supposed to be upheld. But the problem is people don't understand it well enough. And let's face it, our government comes from among us, and they've been lying for 100, 150 years about this stuff, so that we don't really know what we've got. And we don't understand it the way we need to understand it, ergo the class. So we have this absolute right. Power resides in us. From and all power, good and evil, is resides in the individual. Now, the only powers that we can rightly delegate are rightful powers. Now, anybody can act like a criminal, and we all have the power to do so. We don't have the right to do so, right? We don't have the right to go out and harm somebody else, steal their property, or otherwise violate their rights to their kingdom. And so government, again, is supposed to step in those cases. But what is government? Government is a delegation from our rightful powers. And then those powers we delegate to government. And we do it for a number of reasons. First, we do it for safety. If you stop and think about it, there's a whole book in the Bible. If anybody's a Bible reader, it's the book of Judges. And it talks about how everybody did what they thought was right. They just went out, and the way it phrases it is every man did what was right in his own eyes. So by his own measure, he decided what was right and wrong, and it was chaos. Okay. We looked at last time where in the Declaration of Independence, they wrote that the legislative power being delegated to the the legislatures, when those legislatures were dissolved by the king, and the argument was wrongly dissolved, illegally dissolved, but dissolved nonetheless, those powers, incapable of annihilation, return to the people for their exercise. And in the meantime, we were under threat of tumults and invasions from without. Tumults within and invasions without. And the idea is that without a functioning government, people end up taking some of these powers we've given to government, and we'll talk about why we give those in just a minute, but they take those powers and they will use them any way they want. We know that people get all bent out of shape. Look at the Me Too movement and how people will say, "Oh, you're so right. You've been wronged. You've been sexually abused or whatever." I mean, that's what Me Too is all about. But look at how many of those cases have come back as false. And the point is, we can have people taking the law into their own hands, claiming something that is wholly false, acting like a criminal and doing what they want because there's no government around. wherein there would be courts and a process by which we can find out, oh, that was false, and there should be a punishment for speaking that falsehood and sufficient so that you never do it again. And that's why we have government. Safety. We could have people just wanting to go capture as much territory as we want. I mean, there were whole westerns made about this back nearly 100 years ago, 100 years ago, and 80 to 100 years ago. Whole all movies made about this thing about how people just go out and they want to run everybody else off the land and take all their stuff and all their hard work where they cleared the land, they farmed it, they ranched it, and then somebody else comes in and steals it all. Government's there to protect us from that. Otherwise, what would keep it? It would only be the strongest survive. It's not everybody gets an equal shot. It's only the strongest survive. And so then it becomes a matter of just being the biggest, baddest, and then again, it's not about necessarily about law. Remember, that's what the underlying theme of a lot of those westerns was. It was lawlessness. They hoped law would come in and settle all that out, even it all out, and give those that weren't rough and tumble and willing to do anything to get what they wanted or get justice for themselves, it would give them a chance that the power of government could be used in their favor for a change. And so that's why we have government. Ultimately, in the United States, government is there to protect individual rights and do all of the basically do all of the things that we see in the preamble to the US Constitution. Now let's take a peek at that preamble because I think it should give us an idea, a flavor of what we're driving at here tonight. I've got to remember how to share. And share, we're going to do, let's just share the screen. And then and let's go here. Let's just scroll down and we'll just take a peek at the preamble. So, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare. We'll talk about the general welfare as we go tonight, and secure the blessings of liberty. So, the blessings of freedom to not only ourselves, but also our posterity. And because of those things, we, the people, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. That's the preamble to the Constitution. So establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure liberty. And all of the blessings that go along with that, not just safety, but economic and other kinds of blessings. They all are vital and all are part of why we have government. Now, of course, this is at the federal level, but it transcends because so many of the things and the things we're going to look at here uh, are are in, if you will, you may hear the term incorporated, but they are actually incumbent on all of the states. So when we finished last week, we talked about that we would look at the Bill of Rights tonight. And the reason that we talk about natural rights versus civil rights is because there are a couple of different kinds of rights. We mentioned it last week, but let's go over it again tonight. And that is that natural rights are those rights which are inherent to you as a freeborn individual. Okay. So if you stop and think about it, you have to breathe air, you have the right to breathe air. You have to eat and drink, you have the right to eat and drink. You have the right to clothing of your choice, housing of your choice, and so forth, but you don't have necessarily the right to, well, you don't have the right to steal it from someone else. You have to create it if it isn't yours. If it's a piece of a thing, if it's a thing that you need, you have the right to the thing. You don't have the right to somebody else's things. You have to maybe make the thing, buy the thing, or whatever. But we all, in freedom, we have the right to the thing. And if the thing is denied us, then are they not violating our freedom, our natural right to obtain property? And the answer is absolutely. Now, our founders during the creation of the Constitution were very concerned, and some much more than others. And there was a group which came to be known as the Anti-Federalists. And they were especially led by Patrick Henry and George Mason. Patrick Henry ended up refusing to attend the Constitutional Convention. Um, George Mason attended, but said he would not sign the Constitution, would not sign on to it to send it to the people unless it contained at one of his, there were a few demands that he has, but one of them was that it needed a Bill of Rights. I'm going to take this down, stop sharing here for just a second. Um, and it's important to understand a Bill of Rights and why he might uh, talk about a Bill of Rights. And so let's cover. There's two kinds of bills of rights. Uh, the first, and this is what confuses everybody, is like the British bills of rights that happened through the years that became known as the British Constitution. There are some written documents, but most of it is kind of by tradition more than anything. But the written documents and the Bill of Rights that everybody thinks about is called the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta came in the 13th or 14th century. I think it was the 13th century. It was 1200 something. And it was a group of lords who served the king were upset because the king was not not abiding by what agreements he had made with the lords. The lords got their people together who served them, and they went to war. And the outcome of the war was basically a peace treaty, and the Magna Carta was it. The was the net result. The lords agreed that they would come back and serve the king as they had done, so long as the king gave up some of his rights and put them down in a bill, the Magna Carta, Latin for grand letter, and and that he gave up his rights. Therefore, a Bill of Rights granted to the lords. Now, even in the minds of many of the founders who were writing the Constitution, and especially on the other side, arguing with George Mason, Um, they would always say you can't have a Bill of Rights in a setting, in a Republican form of government, because a Bill of Rights is a grant from one who has rights to those who do not have rights and do not possess those rights, and they grant them from their rights. And that's what happened in the Magna Carta. And they couldn't shake this idea that there would be a Bill of Rights that didn't work that way. Mason's argument was no, 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 no. Men are tyrants. Men automatically, human nature is that men want to become a tyrant, and they will act and try to try to overwhelm and get power over anybody and everybody they can, as much as they can, as long as they can. Okay, that was his concern. And his concern was that if our rights were not specifically spelled out, that there would come a point in time people would forget what rights meant. Or they would be lied to about it and say, see, it's not written down, so you don't have them. And that happens today. And Mason was proven to be very wise in this stead. And so he really pushed in the Anti Federalist papers, he really pushed to have a Bill of Rights. And it wasn't just him, it was his fellow Virginian, Patrick Henry. There was a New Yorker, there was a Pennsylvanian, there were other anti Federalists, and it was across the nation. It was not just in one corner of the country, like in the state of Virginia, that they thought this way. I mean, remember, George Washington and James Madison were also Virginians, and all of them had helped create the Virginia Constitution, wherein we get a lot of our stuff for our US Constitution, what came from their Virginia Constitution, which they all helped create. But they all knew, the goods and the bads, and they still had differences of opinion about how things should work. So Mason's idea was, no, we have to have something more concrete than the statement that we shall have a republican form of government and that we all have the same privileges and immunities. As much as he believed that sufficed, that should suffice, he knew human nature, and his argument was against human nature, not against necessarily the verbiage in and of itself. He just said it was incomplete, insufficient to hold at bay those who would be criminal. And we need something clear so that we all have it clearly stated, so that when the criminals act, we have something to go to. So, that said, it did not pass initially in the original Constitution. That's why we have a separate Bill of Rights. When and James Madison started out as a Federalist and more or less flipped sides. He was a Republican for sure, because he stood for a Republican form of government, and he did that throughout his life. He was one of the most consistent of our founding fathers. One of the most consistent is that he stood for Republican governance. In fact, if you want to read about it, he's the go to understand Republican governance. Go to the Federalist Papers and read Federalist 39, and he lays it all out. He describes the difference between a federal government, a Republican government, and how we're a mix, and all of these different things. Um, so Federalist 39 is where you go when you really want to understand Madison's point of view. But Madison became what what they termed an anti-federalist, and more or less because during the constitutional debates after everything was sent to the states, after the Constitution was sent to the states, what they could pass and send to the states, the original Constitution, the states came back and said, we will only pass this if Congress will take up a Bill of Rights and introduce a Bill of Rights and send it to the people. Then we will pass this Constitution. And literally people took Congress or took the founders and was going to hold their congressmen accountable, but they took them on the come and they passed all of this without a Bill of Rights in place in the sheer hope that it would come. Now, in 1789, so 1787 it goes out to the states. 2 years, year and a half later, it's ratified. We get enough states to actually ratify the Constitution, and and it starts. Congress meets. People send their delegates to Congress, and and they're in there. It becomes a debate led by James Madison about introduction of the Bill of Rights. Now you can go to constitutionalgrounds.com, and let me just show you what we've got on the website. Let me go there again. Um, the um, the well, let's get to the right page. So here at constitutionalgrounds.com, if you go to the top and you click on the little hamburger thing here on the left, or if you're on your phone, you'll find the hamburger. It might be on the right, depends on your phone. But the you can go over here to the founding documents, writings, and speeches. Click on that, and it takes you down to a couple of to a bunch of reading that's really good, and I think everybody needs to read. If you want to understand the Constitution, check out this University of Virginia Board of Visitors required law school texts and read those things. It's what got me started when a friend gave me the link to all of this stuff. Eventually, I put it up on the website, but the uh, but this short reading list, and it's a short reading list. Not all the reading is short, but it's a short list of things to read. And those most of them I have on the website here. If not, you can Google them and you can find them. Read through that, you will understand the Constitution. But if we go down here, we find that I've got the a link to the Bill of Rights introduction debate. Now there's more of it, and I literally copied and pasted this from Library of Congress, from their website, from their webpage. Now there's more to the debate than just the couple of days or the day that I put up. Fascinating read. Fascinating read. I love it from a historical perspective. I nerd out on history stuff. Watching how they interacted with each other, how they got things to where they're getting them, getting to a debate, how they toss things around, and you can see them tossing other concerns around that have nothing to do with the debate or entering into a debate. It has to do with other more pressing matters, and they mention those kinds of things, and the how they're going to go about it, and at one point, gee, if we had just gone into debate, we'd already be over. We're just still talking about going into, how we're going to go into it, and that kind of thing, but using 18th century language, which is and they were very, very nice about it and very good about it. But the whole point is you can see in there the introduction of the Bill of Rights. Madison introduced it. Congress debated it over a number of days and then sent it out to the states what parts they thought were necessary. Uh, and you can read Jefferson's thoughts on the whole thing, and it follows Mason pretty much to a T. Now, let's go back and let's look at the Bill of Rights. Now, the key thing is that when we look at the Bill of Rights, we have a number of things to consider. First off, in the First Amendment, we have five things that are going to be mentioned. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So we see here that the order in the First Amendment is really, it's kind of a mix of civil and natural uh, rights. We see here that Congress is being ordered by the Constitution, by we the people, that they shall not do something. And that is, they shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, nor abridging the freedom of speech. So they can't make a law that abridges the freedom of speech. Now, here's the question: do we have, as a natural right, a right to believe and worship as we see fit? And the answer is an absolute yes. The answer is absolutely yes. So far as our worship violates no one else's rights. Okay. Uh, do we have the right to speak as we see fit and express our sentiments as we see them? Yes. What if other people are upset by those sentiments? Well, that's where, as free people, we have to put up with other people's weird sentiments, if you will, or maybe bad sentiments. Do we have the right to, if we have the right to speak, do we have the right to write? And since there's a printing press power, there's an ability to use a printing press, do we have the right to have it mass published and put it out there if we so chose? The answer is an absolute yes. Now, tyrants throughout time always go after these things. And they always look at Iran. Just over the last 60 days, they have murdered 30, 40,000 people. In 2 days, they murdered, reports say, 20 to 30,000 people because they peaceably assembled. And the Islamic regime doesn't want that. And so they just started murdering them. And to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Is that being allowed? It's certainly not being allowed in a tyrant country like Iran right now. And they're working diligently. It's part of the reason that we're over there. We'll talk about that a little bit tonight. Part of the reason that we're over there, um, and I'm not saying good or bad on the thing. I'm just saying it's been said. That's why we're there. Um, and so, at least one part of it. And so, therefore, uh, we have these rights naturally But here is a a mechanical, a codified instrument that's saying Congress can't infringe these things. It's already inherent to us. So this is Mason's point. We're not saying anything that isn't already. We're acknowledging it. We're acknowledging what is there, and we're prohibiting anyone in government from violating these things. Let's go on and get through these a little bit more. A well regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We have a right to our property and protection. We fought a war. The shot heard round the world was the British regulars going after arms, among other things. They were going after stockpiles of cannon, shot, gunpowder, uh, stockpiles of rifles and muskets and all of that. And so part of Paul Revere's ride was telling everybody, get this stuff out of here, as well as stand up and slow or stop the British from going any further. And I should say the regulars, because they were all British at that point. Uh, and so one of the things that I beg everybody to do is when you talk about the Second Amendment, never skip the Fourth, Fifth, and 14th Amendments, because we have a property right to our arms. And so you can just ignore the Second Amendment, if you will. Not saying it's to ignore it, but we can ignore it and just argue from a property perspective. Nobody has the right to infringe our property, and yet here we are having our property infringed. It's a particular type of property, and everybody knew it was going to be what people were going to attack, because what's the first thing the tyrant does? Disarms the populace. And this goes back to time immemorial. Um, they disarm the populace. And when the populace is disarmed, they can't fight back. It's a lot harder. You're fighting guns and cannons and maybe tanks and airplanes with pitchforks and and hose. It's a lot harder to fight back. Um, Now we start to get into there's a third one. This goes directly to a property right, but you can see the mechanical aspect of this. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. So we had the problem that we saw the Nazis and the Soviets do, where they just confiscated property and said, you're housing X number of soldiers or officers or whatever, or get out of the house. We're just taking it over. We've conquered you. Get out. Well, the British were doing that to us, and they're supposed to be on our side. And we wanted to make sure that would never happen again. Why? Because you have a right to your property, your house being one of the biggest pieces of property you can have. And so we made sure that there was a specific time that your property cannot be taken, um, because of what had been done before in tyranny. Now, civil rights are rights that are created by law. They're not inherent to us, to naturally, if you will. They are um, they are, how do I want to phrase this? They are a mechanism to protect our inherent rights. Now, we've seen a few things where government is being told by the Constitution, you cannot do these things. But now we're going to get into where we all have some rights created by the Constitution, by these passages, and the express purpose of a civil right is to protect your natural rights. And this is something that everybody gets wrong. We have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it's basically a bunch of mumbo jumbo that's supposed to be protecting natural rights. And it really doesn't do anything well. Um, and in reality, it set up a bunch of things that did not protect anyone's natural rights. It took from it actually infringed some people's natural rights uh, on behalf of giving to others who weren't necessarily owed it, but that was supposed to be to make things equal, and that was to make rights more equal from their perspective. In reality, it set us kind of to where we're at now and set Americans against themselves because you have haves and you have nots. And that means you have those whose rights are infringed by the Civil Rights Act, and then you have those who gain from the Civil Rights Act. And that's not the way it's supposed to work. But civil rights are often confused and typically are confused with natural rights. Natural rights are inherent. We don't need anybody to codify them. They are inherent with us as long as government is respecting the Republican form. We got them. Civil rights are the mechanisms. We're going to look at this here. So, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause. So, warrants, unreasonable searches and seizures. In other words, our rights, the right of the people, this is us individually and collectively. So we are the people. So every single one of us has these rights. The right of the people to be secure. We have this right. It is inherent. We have the right to be secure from unreasonable searches and seizures in everything, is what this says. Our persons. Now remember, we have a property. Our persons are our personal property. They our persons are also made up of lots of properties like our thoughts, our beliefs, our choices, um, and all sorts of other things that are about our corpus or our body, our person. Okay. Our houses, we have a right to be secure in our houses, our papers and effects. That's everything. That's everything. That's you and everything you own. That's everything. We have a right to be secure in everything from unreasonable searches and seizures, and that right shall not be violated. And no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause. Now, there's a time a search may need to happen. So there needs to be a mechanism by which a search could be rightly obtained. And that would be that through our delegation into a court. And the reason that we delegate to a court rather than having everybody just go out and say, I got to search his house, I got to find my stuff. I know he took it. It's like we've got somebody now who's dispassionate, separated from the emotions of the problem, and uh, and can say, do you have any proof that he took it? Is there any reason to believe he took it instead of somebody else? How would you know he took it? And you don't necessarily have the right to go look for it. Somebody else dispassionate and who won't tear the place up or be looking for what he can steal later or whatever, can go out and make the search for the stuff. So we have a mechanism, a warrant, a court system, which is already up in Article 3, but we have warrants issue and we have some orders about those warrants. There has to be probable cause. Now, I'm not remembering right the moment if that was mentioned in Article 3. Probably not. Not to that extent. It was expected that that would be the way it would be, but that was the problem. You expect that there are certain things. George Mason's point was people will go with what's written and they'll say nothing else matters. And then they'll flip it around and say, look, we get to do anything you didn't tell us we couldn't do instead of a delegated amount of authority be, as I mentioned in our first meeting, is like a scope of work on a work contract that contractors deal with. You are explicitly just by um, by virtue of the nature of the the contract, by nature of the relationship, you are not to do anything. You're not to do anything that isn't on the scope of work. The Constitution is our scope of work. So by nature, you don't get it done that way, but you will have people try to flip it around and say, "Oh, no, 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 it doesn't work that way. I get to do anything unless it tells me I can't." And that works more for us, not for government, because we're not delegating. We've delegated. Um, Everything else remains ours to our powers. Uh, Now, it goes into how is this probable cause to be done? Oath or affirmation, particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. So there's now a process. We have to have this process. And what's this process for? It's to protect the accused, and it's to guarantee justice for the victim or the one who claims to be a victim. And so here we see civil rights being now introduced. You have a right to, you have a natural right to security. You have civil rights to warrants being issued and those being required before your security is in any way breached. It can never be unreasonable. There must be reason to it, and there must be reasonable people behind the whole thing. And I can't tell you, Brian can mention how many times he's seen in court unreasonable people get up and spout all sorts of stuff, or all the people he's talked to as an attorney who want justice for this unreasonable reason and that unreasonable reason, and the attorney has to kind of talk them down and get them thinking reasonable or decline the case altogether because it was so unreasonable there's no making reason out of it. And that's what our government is supposed to be there to help that along. Now there's a process to doing that, and that is we see in the next several amendments. So it says no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime except on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. Grand juries are things that we all need to learn about, but we need to have presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. I want to warn you, the Supreme Court, our Supreme Court, has on multiple occasions added the words uh, right here. It says they basically make this sentence read, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb by the same, uh, what do they call the same, what's all of a sudden I've lost the word they use. Uh, it's a head. What do they mean by it? But basically, they say that there's the state and the federal, and that's why you see state and federal charges for a single crime. Um, and I've lost the word. I'll think of it later and fill it in. But they have just added words to this very phrase, and now you can be tried twice for the same crime. Uh, cannot be done, and we have a lot of work to get it to where it does. Our civil rights are being violated because this order is not being obeyed by government in the legislative branch, in the executive branch, or the judicial branch on this topic. Um, Congress has not corrected the Supreme Court. The states haven't done it. The prosecutors are prosecuting a second time for the same offense, just so long as it is in another jurisdiction, federal rather than state. Uh, and anyway, a civil right created by by the Fifth Amendment, and they won't even follow that. They don't follow the Second Amendment. They don't always follow the Fourth Amendment. They kick in doors without a warrant. Um, they often kick in the wrong door. Um, but that's more of a mistake than a problem. I think they shouldn't be kicking in doors, but that gets into another topic for another day. But then it says, nor shall any person be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. So this is where you see people go before Congress or before the grand jury, and they'll say, um, "Your Honor, I my answer may tend to incriminate me, so I respectfully decline to answer per the Fifth Amendment." And and they will make a statement something along those lines, and their claim is that just the mere answer, giving the answer, might incriminate them, even though they might be talking about something else. It might cause them to confess to something, and they have the right to not do that. Nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. This is huge. No person may be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. It's how you know murder, absolutely no, murder is illegal. Why? Because that is someone depriving the murdered of their life. Did they have due process? No, they got murdered. And it's many will argue, no, the Constitution only limits the government. It doesn't limit everyone else. And no, 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 no. Remember, our limits are the equal rights of others. And so when all of these rights are belong to all of us, no one can violate the rights of any other person. So these are our rights individually, and that means everybody, no person, group, organization, government, nothing. No amount of those people can do that sort of thing. But then we go on, and this is something we all need to learn. This next section is because it is the standard for taxation. We need to get this to John Roberts because he forgot it with the ACA back in 2010 or 11, 12, whatever it was. Uh, but it says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Now, people ask me all the time, so you're saying that you're getting compensated for police, fire, courts, or whatever? And the answer is absolutely, we are being compensated for those things. Even if you never use those things, they're there for you at all times. And all you have to do is dial 911 for police or fire. You always have use of the courts. If anybody does something criminal and you pick up 911, they may bring criminal charges against the person. The courts act on your behalf. There are a lot of ways that it behaves, but it also makes for a better society. It makes for a safer society, and that helps each and every one of us out. And that is just compensation. We got to pay for these people so that we do that through our taxes. Now, where it goes too far is where they're just taking from our pockets to give to people we don't owe for doing nothing to benefit our society other than just exist like we all do. And so as we exist, sure, we're going to make society better, but that doesn't mean we all have to pay for each other everything. That sounds like communism, doesn't it? And that is true. It's not supposed to work that way. It's exactly the opposite, 180 degrees. Nobody is supposed to be taxed or if you will actually extorted to to gather money for which you get no benefit. Sometimes you are disallowed to get a direct benefit just to pay for other people's stuff. And so fill in the blanks. Think about all the things that you have to pay for that don't return to you or that you're kept from because uh, they're going to either charge you something extra, something more, or they say, nope, not for you, or whatever. Those are the things that where it goes sideways. We'll talk about that a little bit more, maybe in the next episode. That wasn't for tonight. So we have taxation, but we also have they can't just come and take your property to build a road without paying you for it. Okay. And you could say, well, you're going to get benefit of the road, except, and we're all being taxed to pay for the road, except not only is this guy going to have to pay the tax, but he's also having his property taken. That's above and beyond everyone else's fair input. So you have to be compensated for that loss of property. And that property and everything will be adjudicated and so forth. Again, supposed to be so it is just. Sadly, for all too long, the the powers that be have not run that justly. And in many jurisdictions that needs some serious reform. Now, the Sixth and Seventh Amendments and the Eighth Amendment get into the criminal side of things. Well, actually, the Sixth and Eighth Amendment are criminal. Seventh Amendment is back to or more civil in terms of the law. But in criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state district wherein the crime shall have been committed. So, where is it to be? In the state and district wherein the crime was committed. That's where you have to have everything done. Um, and which district shall have been previously ascertained by law. So the lines are drawn. It's ascertained by law. That's up to Congress or the state legislatures. Again, see how we've got all this creation going on. Why is this? Because there needs to be justice for the victim, and there needs to be justice for society, and there needs to be a process for the punishment of the guilty, but the guilt the vic or the accused needs to make sure, we all need to make sure that we're protecting everybody's rights. And just because somebody's accused, that doesn't mean they're guilty. And that we need to make sure that we all have this process in mind so that we can get to the truth. The whole idea is to have justice prevail in the end. That means truth. And so we have all of this. The um, the the in the criminal prosecution, the accused has the right to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. Can't be hidden from him. You have the right to know why you're being accused. You have the right to be confronted with witnesses against him. So, in other words, the accused has the right to confront the witnesses against him. It is public. Right now in Oklahoma, we have a thing and people are up in arms. The law is already on the books, but it's an amendatory law where we're going to have cameras put into courtrooms, and some people are up in arms. Oh no, um, we got to think of the victims and we got to have all this privacy. It's like, wait a minute. What it says the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial, and the accused, and in that public aspect, has the right to be confronted with the witnesses against him, in part so he can cross examine them and find out if they're telling the truth, and to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. These are civil rights. They're created to protect our natural rights. Then we go to civil side of things. In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. And so the common law, they brought it into the US Constitution. It didn't exist in the Constitution until this point, but we have the common law brought in for civil suits, and that there are some rules that are brought in. My argument is the whole thing with the common law has gone way overboard. And but here it is, it's on the civil side of things. Um, but note this, in suits at common law where the value in controversy shall exceed how much? $20, $20. The right of trial by jury shall be preserved. That has never been amended, folks. The Supreme Court has said, $20 then is thousands of dollars today. And so you don't necessarily have the right to a trial by jury unless we get to a certain amount. But our Constitution still says what it says. And the magic number is $20 for a civil suit to get a trial by jury. That is, there it is. It's written. It says what it says. Uh, this is not a political issue. It says what it says. Never been amended. If somebody wants to say it should be something else, then they need to amend the Constitution uh, and make it something else, something where it could be on a sliding scale, but still reasonable, maybe. But they're going to have to do it through an amendment process, and nobody's even talking about it. They've got it handled because the courts just do it at a few $1,000, and it's 5 or 10 now, depending upon the state, before you can get a jury trial. Then we've got the Eighth Amendment. Now, the Eighth Amendment says excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. So we will see excessive bail shall not be required. We'll see that violated from time to time. We saw with Donald Trump excessive fines being imposed. I mean, how many $100 billion or billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars for what amounted to a paperwork error. And it was, of course, ultimately just all tossed, but it was excessive um, for in the way of fines. It was higher than just about anything other people have done. It does, and who decides what's excessive? Hopefully, reason. Hopefully, we the people through our legislators in Congress and our states can get to some numbers or something. Uh, we might need to look into that. I don't know of any numbers drawn in the sand where things are. I know they get done in courts oftentimes, but there are some states that have some numbers on that. Nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Again, nothing set in stone here. There's no guidelines given. We just have to come to figure out what's cruel and unusual. And and I think some of the things that are out there are cruel and unusual. One of which I might argue would be life imprisonment. I think if somebody is worthy of life imprisonment, they're probably worthy of death, and we probably should just do away with them. Now, I know there's a lot of people that are squeamish about that, but we're looking at murderers getting out of other countries that go in and open their prisons, and all of a sudden you got murders happening all over the place because murderers are out doing what murderers do. And so I just throw that out there. But there are things that are done in some of these prisons, if you learn about them, uh, would make the the strongest among us maybe a little bit squeamish. Uh, so those are civil rights, and of course they're not the only ones. There will be others, um, but those are not natural in and of themselves, right? They're there to protect. This was like, how are we going to go about protecting our natural rights? But we get into perhaps the two most important areas of the Bill of Rights. And that is where all the unenumerated or the unnamed rights are all protected. They're all right here. And everybody in government's going to lie about this very phrase. The Ninth Amendment says the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So, all it's the catch all. Madison said that's the catch all. Not quite the phraseology he used, but that's what he meant. Go read it. He said it on day one as he was introducing day one of the Bill of Rights introduction. It's what I've got on the website that I pointed out earlier. So he's got the catch-all. Where do you find the right to eat and drink what you want? The Ninth Amendment. Where do you find your right to raise your children as you see fit? The Ninth Amendment. Where do you see a right to choose your own health um, uh, strategy and techniques? The Ninth Amendment. Where do you see that no one has the right to violate your rights? Well, the Ninth Amendment, the Fourth, the Fifth, the 14th reiterates a lot of what's in the Fifth. So, but it's all stemming from the fact that we have these natural rights and nobody can tell us that they don't exist because they're there. Are you free without, or is some, if somebody can tell you no, are you free? The answer is no. If you're not free, then they're violating their rights. We're not equal. Somebody has set themselves above, the masters set themselves up above the serf. And that's not ever to happen. It's always to be equal to each other. Now, that doesn't mean how you run your own house, but legally speaking, absolutely, absolute equals. male, female, doesn't matter your race, your country of origin, if you're naturalized or born here, does not matter. Americans are all equal, period, end of report. Supposed to be the way it's done around the world. And if we did this, or if everybody did this around the world, it would be great. Sadly, when our government goes into other countries, usually they don't teach these concepts. They teach democracy and a completely different form of government than what we've been talking about. But this is what our founders talked about. So every natural right inherent to being a free person is codified as our individual right by this Ninth Amendment. And it shall not be construed to deny or disparage the rights not specifically named. That's what this means. So a law that violates it, denies it, disparages it, absolutely illegal. And all you have to do is go to the Ninth Amendment to prove it. All right. Now, the 10th Amendment talks about powers. We've been talking all night and the last couple of weeks about delegating powers to government. Now, the 10th Amendment, and you hear a lot of people talking about 10th Amendment, 10th Amendment. The powers, it says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So remember, the Ninth Amendment addresses rights. The 10th Amendment addresses delegated powers. Government does not have rights other than the rights inherent with the powers we delegate to them. Okay? We have come together in as a nation, and so our nation has rights as a nation. And so our government can make treaties on our behalf and things like that that we looked at. They can do those things on our behalf. Why? Because we delegated them the power to do so. If we didn't delegate the federal government in the articles, uh, anywhere in the Constitution, but especially in the articles, if we did not delegate them a power, that power remains with the states and the people, period. It cannot be that the government just does whatever they want if it's not a power that is a part of their delegation, then they cannot be doing it. Now there's a little bit of latitude because we may delegate them a power, and that includes, we got to do this, that, and the other thing in order to make this thing work. And it's like, okay, it's incumbent. For instance, we have we have given the power of Congress um, to buy land and create forts. Well, somehow they've got to be built. So we must have given them the power to build them or pay for the building of forts. So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. But you can't go off the reservation and just say, hey, we think this is really, really, really necessary. And so therefore we're Congress. And hey, we've been told that we can do that which we think is really necessary. Um, Back up in Article 1, and it's like, yeah, no, it's necessary within these bounds. And they just ignore all the limits and they just go off and do whatever they want to the whatever extent they want when there are strict limits put in place. So the ninth and 10th, and this will make you smarter than 95% of Americans, 99% of Americans. The Ninth Amendment, rights, 10th Amendment, powers. Rights always belong to the individual. Powers maybe delegated those powers. And when I say rights, I mean natural rights. The natural rights always belong to the free individual so that they remain free. They can never be taken up by government lest we be dictated to. And sadly, we have been dictated. Just look at COVID, right? Shut down the country? How do you do that? You can't do that in a country that's running lawfully without there being a literally in according to our constitution, there has to be a war, an invasion. It would be argued there was an invasion. It was just microbial instead of an army. It may have been part of the army or whatever because whatever. There could have been all sorts of arguments, but the point is, it went on and on and on, and that was when we saw the tyranny. A couple weeks might be understood, but beyond that, absolutely not. There was, you know, now we're just people dictating. I mean, it got to the point where you weren't going to be allowed to travel unless you had a a travel papers permission slip from the overlords, right? And we don't want that. Nobody wants that. So uh, there we have the Bill of Rights, natural rights versus civil rights. Now, I want to go to an area that I've been dealing with here in Oklahoma. Um, and I do this just because it's everywhere, but I want to show how people do not understand rights. Okay. And this is especially true in the areas that we tend to get into, especially with health freedom. This is a health freedom issue. Let me share this one more time. Go up here and oops. And here I've got an image of a flyer that was sent out, and this is the MOHA group, Make Oklahoma Healthy Again. And what they did was there is a bill going on right now in our state house. It passed one of two committees that it has to pass. I'll be working on the other committee tomorrow. Hopefully, it'll never pass and it won't get to the floor. But what it says is that basically that a certain amount of folic acid has to be added to masa. Masa is corn flour. You make uh, tortillas and all sorts of different goodies, tamales and everything else out of it. But if you're a corn grinder and you're selling it in Oklahoma, it's got to have a certain amount of folic acid. Now, for those who know, and it, some people can't metabolize folic acid; it actually becomes a toxin. People with the MTHFR gene can't do that. Quite frankly, that I mean, it's really important. So the bill is actually going to poison people. I mean, look what they've been doing with fluoride. You may be for or against it. But the problem is they've mandated it. Can they mandate what we put into our bodies? What I put into mine? No. But they've been doing it for years. They've been getting away with it because we haven't understood they can't mandate things and dictate what goes into our bodies. And so so corn comes out of the ground, it gets ground up, you've got masa. I mean, it's dried, then ground, you've got masa. They are dictating that there would be folic acid added among whatever other um, uh, enhancements they have ordered in the past. And they tend to think that this is all okay. This is what I call, and they think it's okay because they have been elected to office and therefore they are in a position to make rules like this. Like, yeah, you can make rules like this. You're not allowed to make rules like this because we have a right to be folic acid free other than what is natural, which would actually be folate, what is natural, naturally found. And if I'm going to take folic acid, I can go out, purchase it, and decide to put it in my mouth or make it, but decide to eat it, then I will be responsible for me. That's freedom. Now, what I point this flyer out for is note that there is no argument to the natural rights that we've been making. It is only, hey, folic acid isn't natural folate, and 1 in 4 can't properly metabolize folic acid. It's appealing to what should be, morals and what should be uh, sense. I won't say common sense because sadly it's not as common as we would like, but should be sense and should be enough to get the guy done, right? But in reality, he doesn't believe that it's a problem and that there's 1 in 4. In fact, his legislative assistant, do you have documentation for that? Do you have a study? Do you have studies? And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm talking to you as an Oklahoman, and even if this was perfectly harmless and and I was not harmed. Nobody in Oklahoma was harmed by the addition. You cannot dictate it. You cannot mandate it. It's outside of your right to dictate somebody else has to spend money and all of the buyers have to spend money to pay for something they didn't choose. You ordered it. And it's that simple. And that's what we've got to get behind. Because if we can get behind that argument and start making that argument around the country, all of a sudden Brian is going to have just remarkable success in court. Because when he brings a health freedom case, all of a sudden the courts are going to have to actually look at the Constitution and reevaluate everything they've been doing for 120 years because they're over 120 years, 125 years. They have not followed the Constitution for longer than that, but for health freedom, since they were standing up and dictating measles vaccines back in or smallpox vaccines back in 1905. The Supreme Court upheld Jacobson. Uh, they haven't done it. But we don't make the right arguments. It doesn't matter that a quarter of the people can't can't take it. 100% of the people have a right to folic acid free masa. Why? I mean, if the masa maker wanted to put it in, they could put it in as long as they had proper labeling of it, and then we could go buy a different masa. But if the government's mandating it, that would mean that there is zero masa to be found in Oklahoma without it, at least at the industrial quantity. The only exceptions that they were making were for cottage industries that were making cottage level small batch, uh, doing small batch grinding. If you were having grinding your own or having your own ground for you, in these small batch kind of things, or if well that was pretty much it. Or if you're making your own small batch for a if you're like a taqueria or something like that, you can do it for that. Make your own tamales and tortillas and things, but only if you're grinding yourself in small batches. Those are the only exceptions. Everybody else has to buy this stuff. But 100% of us are have a right to be free of it. Now, stop and think about who's probably behind it. Follow the money. Whenever you look at this stuff, always follow the money. All of a sudden you'll create, and I know Oklahoma's small in comparison, but if they can do it in one state, it then catches on, they can get it in other states. And it may be that other states are doing the same thing. But all of a sudden you've got a captured market, and then you've got for the folic acid makers, and it's only folic acid. Why aren't they doing all sorts of other things? Probably because there's a folic acid company that's got some bucks to spend and sees some some uh, some profit to be made, and that they can capture a large share of the market. All of a sudden, big bucks just because government makes a dictate. Now, the problem is, are we going to be able to fight this in court? Probably not, because the courts don't see this stuff. But my point to us is note the appeal to science. The appeal should never be to science. It should always be to right. Um, uh, in the most absurd case, bring them the most absurd case. It's absolutely harmless. I have a right to be free of it. If they said you can't buy dry masa, you can only buy wet masa, that which has been reconstituted with water. Why? Why can't I buy dry? I mean, from time immemorial, flour has been out there. I mean, come on, time immemorial. Now you're going to dictate I can only buy wet. I cannot buy just regular flour? See, dictates like that, the government has no right in a delegated Republican form of government to do, because that puts them above us. It doesn't keep them where they belong as a delegated uh, below or at most equal to, because those who are making laws are equal to us as well. But it can only be equal to or below. It cannot raise itself above. As I often say, the butler can't dictate to the master of the house. It's the other way around. And government, of course, they want to say, no, 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 we make the rules. No, 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 you make rules within a certain set of limitations. All right. So enough of that. Um, so uh, that is most of what I've got going on. Um, Lois brings up a good point. She says, of course, the courts do not notice that the Jacobson order in Massachusetts offered the alternative paying $5 to not take the smallpox inoculation. Yeah, yeah. Oftentimes, like your licensing, we've talked about licensing, your licensing scams. Um, and I will call them all scams. If they're government and they're licensing, it's a scam. But uh, I've had it, I've seen it where didn't have a license, got a ticket, never took care of the license. All they wanted was the big fine. That's really all it was about. Pay the fine, you're out. You still haven't taken care of the license issue. Just you pay the fine as a cost of doing business, whatever, you're still license free. It gets really costly. Don't recommend that we do that. I recommend that we reform everything and get everything constitutional. But yeah, the $5 solve if everybody paid $5, that solves the pandemic that was going on. Yeah, right. Sorry. The $5, remember, this was 1905. $5 was a lot of money. $5 was a day or two's wage, generally. Just 10 years later, money being about the same as in 1905, Henry Ford was paying $25 a week in gold uh, to his auto workers, and they were well paid. So $5 was quite a bit of money to most people in 1905. At least a couple days, maybe even a week's worth of labor uh, to get that, depending upon what you did. But that's pretty pricey. But it doesn't solve a pandemic, and this is the problem. If there is an alternate that is financial, what is their real goal? Is it really what they are proposing, what they're saying they're doing all of this stuff for? Or is it really to get more money out of you? Or is it to make somebody some money? And so this got kicked a year ago. The one in Oklahoma got kicked a year ago. Didn't get anywhere. They changed authors, and this author's getting it through. Has gotten it through at least one committee. We'll see. But again, nobody's making the right argument. The right argument is no. I have a right to be folic acid free. Well, do you have a problem? I have the right. It doesn't matter whether I have a problem or not. There are plenty of Oklahomans that do, and that puts the number of 1 in 4. That's nearly a million Oklahomans. That's 850,000 Oklahomans would not be able to eat that stuff or without repercussions. And but that should not necessarily be our argument. Certainly it can be part of the argument, but they have a right to be without it. You can't therefore dictate it. It's really that simple. And all I got was argument out of his staff, and they refused to take my phone number and have him call me, or even I don't even know if they'll report to him that I called. And it was that bad. Um, uh, so we have a lot of work we have to do to reform our government and get them into line. All right. Are there questions that you guys have? I hope it's pretty straightforward, but are there any comments? I haven't seen much tonight. Brian was on for a little while, then he had to get off. So we haven't had much in the way of conversation. Um, the the I hope that you see the 9th and the 10th Amendments for the special um, powers that they have. I mean, that 9th Amendment is all powerful, and it's so short. But we've got to educate people about that. Um, Lois says, yes, $5 was a lot. Arguments could have been made to make it affordable, something like the riots that rightly
Yes, $5 was a lot. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm getting feedback. Something less expensive than the riots that rightly happened. Extortionate. Staff refused to record your communication. Yeah, staff refused to record my communication to the elected representative. She works for what we call OMS. It's the basically it's just the bureaucracy there at the Capitol, and oh, what a mess they make. But we'll see. What's that?
I said I apologize for that. My microphone came in and out, and I was playing you in the background. That's why you heard the feedback.
I get it.
I just want to jump in and say hello. Great class as always. Sorry I wasn't able to participate very much, but I do want to say we had a really important decision today from the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't know if you touched on it at all.
Mirabelli. No, I've been out of the loop all day.
Mirabelli v. Bonta. It was the case against the parents brought against the California Attorney General, which was against the transgender policy that said that kids basically, that schools could keep it secret from parents to transition their kids. That policy that went to the Supreme Court. And so a very, very big decision that came out of the U.S. Supreme Court today, blocking that gender transition secrecy in schools policy. And they had cited, and some of the amicus briefs that were filed had cited anyway. I know Beckett Law filed a great one that specifically talked about the Mahmoud v. Taylor decision, which I've mentioned numerous times in relation to the vaccination issue, but it's important because it does touch directly on the school vaccination issue. In fact, we are getting ready to file a supplemental brief as a result of this decision. We're already working on it now. We're going to be filing one in direct response to this ruling from the Supreme Court because, for instance, the amicus brief and others have raised, the one I just mentioned, have raised the point that Mahmoud said your right to religious freedom and a parent's right to direct the upbringing of their children does not end at the gates of the schoolhouse. All right. It follows them into the classroom. And that goes for vaccinations. That goes for transgender policies like this, that curriculum, as we saw in Mahmoud, dangerous curriculum. Parents have the ultimate authority over the upbringing, the education, even the faith of their children to exert and to say to the school, this is our faith and we don't agree with this. And California was trying to separate that. They keep trying to make children to be autonomous adults, almost to be independent when it comes to these very adult decisions, to pull them away from parents, which is very dangerous and very, very evil. To say it's never in human history been the case that a child, 10, 12-year-old child, would be completely emancipated in that way and able to make these decisions. So this is really, really great. It's a great precedent. I want to make everybody aware of it. And the Supreme Court did get this right. I know a lot of times, we harp on them. I know you do anyway, David. I'm not going to admit on air the times that I've harped on them, but I know that you do. And well, as lawyers, we do our harping and we do our harping in court. We do it in court and in the briefs we file. But I'm not just going to go off the cuff and say anything. But I will say that they got it right, and I think, of course, you would agree that they got it right in saying that parents have that authority over their children, and the state of California can't have a policy like this where you say no. The schools even have to. Teachers objected to this too, David, because it's ridiculous. A teacher in the classroom was saying, well, hold on, I have a religious objection to this transgender stuff too. I don't want to. You're making me participate in it. You're forcing me not only to participate in it by calling them preferred pronouns and recognizing that they're a different sex, but you're now also forcing me to keep it a secret from the parents, to participate in your secrecy, to participate in your cover-up, keep this from the parents. And that also violates my religion. So, it really, talk about government overreach. And the great thing about the Supreme Court, you may not like lifetime appointments, but the great thing about lifetime appointments is that they survive elections. Okay, they survive elections. So the fact that, Trump's going to be gone in 2 years. Well, yeah, so what? The Supreme Court justices, God willing, will not be. Okay, and they will still be there, and they could be there for another president and another president after that and another president after that. So you're not just going to get these things overturned so quickly as you think. Whereas with elections, this is why I always say, I know people don't like me to say it because people are so political these days. They like to put all of their energy and all of their resources, quite frankly, behind political campaigns. But that only gets you so far. That gets you 4 years. Executive orders can be undone when the next president comes in 4 years from now. Supreme Court precedent doesn't get undone in 4 years or 8 years or even 16 years or even very often 20, 25 years, 30 years, sometimes not even 100 years. Getting good legal precedent is way more permanent than getting a good person elected into office. Not that that's not important. We need to protect our borders. We need to protect, national security, all of those things. We need someone who's in there to protect us. And I think that's the main role of the presidency, in my opinion, is to really safeguard the people and safeguard their rights and to protect national security, really, in large, in the common, obviously there's the common good and welfare, and Congress, has a responsibility for that of the people. But, all of these policy changes, all of these, this legal precedent and policy, I mean, that's short-lived if if you're relying on a presidential administration. That's really short
Right.
lived. So anyway,
Right.
I don't want to keep droning on and on. I just want to
Well,
tell you about that decision because I think it's a really important decision and people need to go back and read it. Again, it's Mirabelli v. Bonta, and it just came out today.
and just to share a little bit of my history for people who don't know me yet fully, I escaped California over part of this issue. So back in 2008, California declared homeschooling illegal. And part of the reason they did that was they had to reverse themselves 7 months later because the court that did it thought they finally had the case that they were going to be able to dictate over parents and get away with it. They had the case that was going to prove it once and for all, and they were going to do it through the courts because wasn't done through the legislature or anything like that. Uh, but in their writing, in their opinion that they sent down, what they did was they basically said that the children do not belong to the parents or something to that effect, or the parents do not possess rights over the child. The children are the state's, like state apostrophe s. The state the state has right to the child. And this just goes right along with they've continued in that thought process. They had to undo some of it, but they've gone and they've been a little more clever. They were trying to work around it and force teachers to basically emancipate these kids rather than rather than just take the child from the parents. They were going to convince the child to leave the parents, and they were going to support them, uh, at least in thought, if not in actual body. So anyway, that's know this one very well. We were not. I left before all of this stuff really kicked off in California in the schools. They weren't going that direction then, because again, that was 2008. My kids were pretty much gone from school, certainly California schools at that point, and so don't know anything about what was going on in those schools at that time. But it wasn't nearly what it became, and so anyway, I put that out there for everybody. Hey, I just want to thank you, Lois, for what your words here. I put them up on the screen. She says she's a retired attorney. Uh, Somehow, law school didn't cover this ninth and 10th aspect. Appreciate your confession of how embarrassed you were to this. Uh, you're very welcome.
Don't be embarrassed because I'm an attorney too. And guess what? They never taught us about Ninth or 10th Amendment either.
and
It's like glossed over as if it doesn't exist.
And here's the thing, if you go back and you think about law school, and it's like what they do with medical school. They take, the basic human stuff in medical school, and they teach how you can cut and drug it. They don't talk about how the whole thing works as a whole and everything like that. They do the same thing with the Constitution in law school. They divert, they go. I mean, well, I won't mention it. But well,
Keeping you
Barack Obama was a constitutional law professor, and he didn't know the Constitution for anything. I mean, look at the ACA. There's nothing more unconstitutional than the ACA, the uh, Affordable Care Act. That is completely and utterly unconstitutional, and and yet he's a constitutional professor? I'm sorry. There's a problem here, and it should hopefully we will get control of our law schools as we get control of the medical schools, and they'll actually start doing some benefit for society once again by actually teaching some valuable and truthful things. But they haven't taught the Constitution for a long time. My wife talks about her con law class that she took, and it was so disgusting because they did not dig into the Constitution at all. It was all about Supreme Court precedent and what the court said about the Constitution rather than digging into the Constitution itself. Um, and so, anyway, I hope this has been a benefit to everybody. I just teach because I hope everybody else does this because um, it's what it's going to take to be able to win cases in court is literally to bring about a change of mind in the public, and as that happens, we will see the court follow suit. It'll be take a little longer, but it will come.
Yeah.
Um,
David, I
so
want to thank you so much. We have one more week in this free series, and I just want everybody watching and who listens after tonight to know that this is available. I'm sure you already mentioned it. This will be available after the 4 weeks. Just obviously, it's a benefit of membership, of being a paid member, premium member, 25, which basically just means any donation of $25 or more per month, and you have access to this class. You will get a private Zoom link, and only people who are at that level will be admitted into that Zoom. So it is, in that way, a little bit exclusive, but it's a member benefit. I mean, we like to provide it from time to time. We do these free classes because we want to show people just how valuable this course is. David does a fantastic job. I learned things, folks. Just because I've been an attorney and I practice, civil rights law and constitutional law doesn't mean I know everything. And certainly, it's been a learning experience listening to David for years, not just in this course, but also working with him on various initiatives and legislative initiatives and things like that, and our conversation. So it's really an invaluable resource. He is, but the course is as well. So I really encourage all of you to consider signing up. You'll have one more free class next week. David, do we have an idea as to what we're going to talk about? Are we going to talk about war powers? Are we going to talk about what's going on in the Middle East? Or
nobody asked about it. We could talk about that. I think we should. Um, uh, we've talked about it in the private class several times. We should talk about it. I don't
Well,
know if
anyone has suggestions, why don't you put them in the comments? I noticed I'm not getting comments for whatever reason, David, from Facebook or from X or from Rumble.
We're going to have to go in and make sure we
it's
answer
posting
all of
there.
those.
I made sure it was posting. It was even playing on X this week, which for the past couple of weeks it had not been doing.
Okay.
It was even posting on X, but we're so heavily shadow banned that nobody sees, hardly anybody sees what we post on those platforms. So that's why we're getting most of the viewers just from the direct StreamYard registration link. But please post ideas, things that you'd like to see us cover next week in the last free class, and then hopefully going forward after next week, we'll have at least a few of you to stick around for the class as it moves beyond this initial 4-week trial. But I can't thank you enough for doing this again, David. And
you're very welcome.
It was a great class, and we hope to see all of you and more next Monday, same time.
One other thing, and that is you can go to Facebook, YouTube, X, and share the classes that we've been doing. They're on there. Share those with your friends. If they will help anybody, they can only help us all. So go ahead and share those around. Let everybody know about We the Patriots USA, $25 a month, and you get benefit of the class. But really, the money goes to such bigger work, and we're just thankful that all of you tune in. I am excited about everything that's been happening. We're going to call it a night. Thank you. Have a good night, and we will see you next Monday, same time, same place. Good night. Be free.